Hello and welcome back. I am Dr. Alison with Little Black Bag Functional Medicine, and today we are getting into episode 3 of our May series on brain health. So this is our brain hormone conversation today, and I've been so excited all month to get to this one because this is so much of what I see in my practice every single day, especially with our program with Nurse Jen and our perimenopause power program. The midlife woman who walks in, who tells me her brain has changed, her sleep has changed, her mood has changed, her cycle has changed, and no one seems to be connecting the dots other than saying it's perimenopause. There's not much we can do about it. Got to suffer through it. You'll feel better in a year or so. But today we're going to really lean in to connect the dots of why hormones affect the brain, what to look for, and we'll talk a little bit about what you can do to kind of course correct now. So if you've been listening to our episodes 1 and 2, you know that I've been walking you through the 5 drivers of brain fog. We have hormones, infections, sleep, mood, and insulin. Last week, we went deep on the infections piece with long COVID and the post-viral brain. And today we go deep on hormones and not just estrogen. We want to talk about estrogen, progesterone, thyroid, and a piece of what we've already talked about in past podcasts, but the gut health with our estrobolome, which is a part of our gut microbiome that's actively running your hormones from inside your intestines. And it's really a forgotten part of hormone balance too. So before we jump in, I want to name 2 things up front. One, doors close on the Mama Brain Reset this Sunday at midnight. So you have about a week. We have 12 mamas, 30 days, the whole framework for brain health, oil kits, group calls, private consults. So if you've been hovering over the link, thinking about commenting or joining us, this is your week. 2, I'm teaching my class, the Feminine Medicine on Brain Health, this Wednesday night at the Chakra Healing Room in Wentzville. Is going to be a deeper, more embodied version of this conversation with the energy work we do alongside the functional medicine work. So the link is in the description if you'd like to come, and I'd love to see you in person too. And friendly reminder before we dive in, this is for educational purposes here. It's not personalized medical advice. We don't have a relationship, but I'd be happy to support you on your journey. You can find me at littleblackbagmedicine.com. Join the Mama Brain Reset program or work with someone in your area who's willing to look at all of your labs and look at the whole story for you. So as always, everything in today's episode, which includes like specific labs, supplements, any notes, will be on my blog as a transcript. So if you're driving or folding laundry, you don't have to take notes. You can just click the link and read. So let's start by talking what changed me a little bit on this whole topic about brain health and hormones, because we know that estrogen directly affects the brain, our memory, our mood, our energy. And so many women tell me that in the second half of their cycle, that luteal phase is where everything falls apart. And they usually suffer through this because there aren't many options pharmaceutically, I should say. And also, it's normal. It's common, right? We just like, oh, it's PMS, I fall apart, I have crappy 2 weeks, and I have 2 good weeks. And then something comes along. Maybe it's a virus or an infection that changes your hormone patterns. Sometimes it's having a baby. Sometimes it's an autoimmune issue. And sometimes it is simply perimenopause starting to creep in. But the symptoms go from cyclical to daily. So the brain fog, the lost words, the insomnia, the roller coaster moods. And this is when most women step back and go, oh, it is time to take care of myself. Because the life formula of trying to get everything done in the follicular phase, those 2 weeks of feeling good before hormones downshift, is not going to cut it anymore. And now self-care, lifestyle, sleep, food, gym, all of the things that we need to do become a mandated daily event and not just something to squeeze in during your period. Like, oh, I don't feel good, I'm PMSing, it's time to take care of me. It's now, oh my gosh, I have to do this every day. And it is overwhelming and it is frustrating and it is a lot of time and focus effort. And I just want to acknowledge how much you're doing, even if it doesn't feel like enough or if it doesn't feel like it's working, you're still learning, you're still exploring, and there's a lot of options out there for you. So let's kick this off with talking about estrogen because usually it's the loudest part of the conversation. It's typically where we go with bioidenticals, like we just need to have our estrogen checked. Most specifically because it's the strongest form of estrogen in our reproductive years, which is estradiol. It's not just a reproductive hormone, it's also a brain hormone. It helps with the production of serotonin for your mood and your sleep. It supports dopamine for motivation and reward. It supports acetylcholine, which is your memory and your focus and your word finding. So when estradiol drops, and it does throughout your cycle, especially in perimenopause, every single one of those neurotransmitter systems get less support. And here's the confusing part, I think. The first symptoms of perimenopause are not always the hot flashes. They are often the brain symptoms, the memory issues, the mood shifts, the sleep disruption, the anxiety that doesn't feel like you. Those can start in your late 30s and early 40s, years before your cycle changes, because we're not testing for perimenopause medically. They're going to tell you there's no test. You're going to be told it's just anxiety, right? And there's a research study from Cornell that did brain imaging on perimenopausal women. And what they found was extraordinary and also a little scary because women in perimenopause show metabolic changes in their brain that look more similar to early Alzheimer's patterns than they do chronologic aging in men of the same age. That is in neurology, and that is in 2017. So that tells us that the perimenopausal brain is in a real measurable transition state. This is not something that we're making up. It's on the imaging. Estradiol does something else that does not get talked about enough as well. It helps regulate glucose use in the brain. When estradiol drops, your brain becomes less efficient at using glucose, which is its primary fuel. So suddenly your brain is starving. Even when your blood sugar looks normal, maybe you have a normal hemoglobin A1C, you have normal glucose levels, you're eating. But this is why that part of the brain fog and those afternoon crashes get so much worse in perimenopause, and why a woman who used to skip breakfast at 35 now all of a sudden can't do it at 45. There's also another piece with this is that estrogen is neuroprotective. It supports the growth of new neurons and the maintenance of the synaptic connection. So how your neurons connect to each other, how they talk, how they communicate, and the resilience of your brain to inflammation. So when perimenopause comes along and your estradiol drops without support, your brain becomes more vulnerable to every other driver we have talked about. So inflammation hits harder, post-viral effects hit harder, stress hits harder, sleep hits harder. Estrogen was the buffer and the protector, kind of the guard of the brain. And when it goes, everything gets louder, which only compounds all of this inflammation. Now, perimenopause really is an inflammation state. And we want to think of it as an actual pause button on your body. So wherever you are, when you go into peri, your body's going to hit a pause on shifting anything in your metabolic state, your immune state, your hormonal state, and your inflammatory state. So you're going to stay there in menopause. It's going to be so much harder to break out of these inflammatory states once you're in peri. So it's your best job right now to manage all of these things before you're fully in menopause and you're kind of stuck there, and then you're now in a deeper battle. And I also want to say this too, because if you're in your late 30s, maybe your early 40s, and you're listening to this thinking, well, I'm not in menopause yet, this is not me. Perimenopause can start a full decade before menopause. So the average age of menopause is around 51, which means it can usually start in the early 40s. And the brain changes can start even earlier. So your cycles don't have to be irregular. You don't have to have hot flashes. The brain changes can be the first sign that the hormone landscape is shifting. Joint pain is the first sign that the inflammation is shifting and staying and not moving. The stubborn weight gain that's not responding to perfect diets, perfect exercise, perfect sleep, perfect supplements, maybe even GLPs, is because of this hormone landscape that's not being supported. So if you're in your late 30s and your brain has been different, don't let anyone dismiss you because you might be too young for perimenopause. You're not too young. The brain knows first. And of course, it could be another driver, like the infections that we talked about, and mold, inflammation, and blood sugar, which we're going to talk about in next week too. But we're talking about hormones today. So I had a patient who came in, she was only 38, a high-functioning attorney, and she felt like she had been losing her words in meetings for about 6 months. Words that she used to use every single day are now gone. Waking up at 3 a.m. with an anxiety she never had before, but her cycles were still regular, so she was told it was just stress. Her gynecologist said too young for perimenopause, and by the time she got to me, she was convinced she had early onset Alzheimer's and was kind of preparing for the worst. So we ran her hormones, redid a Dutch test. Her estradiol was dropping into that perimenopausal range. Her progesterone was crashed. So now we're looking at ratios of hormones, which is also really important, and the timing of hormones. So then we look at the blood work. Her thyroid was borderline low. Her ferritin was at a 12. So anemia, oxygen, metabolism, all of these things were dragging, but not bad enough to the point where medication was needed. So that's kind of the sweet spot that we want to see people in, because we don't want you getting to the point where things have crashed so hard that we're now dependent on medications to solve. So 6 months of targeted support. She was able to get sleeping through the night, finishing her sentences, crying in my office because she had her life back, not crying at her office because she was falling apart. And she was perimenopausal, but she needed that full lifestyle support, not just hormones. So we want to make sure that we're getting on these things before they become end stage and almost unsupportable, okay? So let's talk about progesterone, because if estrogen's like the loud one, progesterone's kind of like the quiet one that does so much of the work without anybody noticing. And it's because it's our brain's primary calming hormone. It metabolizes into a compound called allopregnanolone, which acts on the same GABA receptors that calm anxiety, it regulates sleep, it stabilizes mood. So when you have enough progesterone, you feel grounded, you can sleep through the night, you can hold stress without spiraling too much. And then when progesterone drops, which usually happens before estrogen does in perimenopause, you lose another buffer. And this is also why you go, but Alison, progesterone's the second half of my cycle. Why is my PMS so bad? Because that ratio of progesterone to estrogen is not correct. And because progesterone and estrogen are crashing right before your period starts. So you do lose that progesterone for a few days. And that's where that insomnia comes in as well. So like we talked about, the same with estrogen, progesterone has the same symptoms with waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning and not being able to fall back asleep, anxiety out of nowhere, not being able to handle stress, crying at all the small things. These are not like personality changes. These are progesterone changes. These are hormone changes. So as that's dropping and that GABA support is decreasing, your nervous system has lost its sedative. And so here's the thing. In our regular cycle, progesterone rises after ovulation in the second half of your cycle. So you can almost feel that happening, feeling more calm, more focused. And then, like we said, it drops right before your period. And that's when the calm goes with it. So as we go into peri, that withdrawal happens more often, more deeply, with less recovery in between, especially if you're getting your period every 2 to 3 weeks, it's getting shorter, things like that. So bioidentical progesterone, given at the right time, at the right form, can be transformative for a lot of women. There's a lot of different options, from pharmaceutical to compounded to low dose supplemental. So prescription-wise, you can get oral micronized progesterone. You can take that at night to help rebuild GABA support, restore sleep, calm the nervous system. Topical progesterone creams can do similar work, but again, the dose matters, the timing matters, the form matters, how your personal body responds matters. Synthetic progestins, which are what in most hormonal birth control, don't actually do the same thing because they're different molecules. They bind to different receptors. So if you're being offered birth control for your perimenopause symptoms, know that this isn't quite the same conversation as something like bioidentical progesterone support. That's a critical distinction. And I want to talk about this for a minute because so many women have been put on hormonal birth control as a solution to perimenopause. And then they come to me confused about why it's not working, or maybe they feel worse, like at least the periods are managed, but the symptoms are not. And that's because those synthetic progestins are not progesterone. They are progesterone-like compounds that the pharmaceutical industry has because, one, they could be patented, but they do not metabolize down into allopregnanolone the way bioidentical progesterone does, which means it does not impact your GABA receptors. In fact, it can actually block different progesterone receptors to make symptoms worse, not better. So if you're feeling like you're getting worse, your sleep got worse, your anxiety got worse, I'm not surprised. You're not alone. And honestly, that's what happened to me as well. So as far as bioidentical progesterone in a prescription form, we can do things like prometrium when it's oral. You can do topical creams from compounding pharmacies. A lot of times I work with women who already have a primary care or a gynecologist who's open. I also have prescribers that I trust. But most of the time, we can supplement with a low-dose topical progesterone cream that's available without prescription through FullScript. And it could be so effective for women at any age, but specifically in perimenopause. So the point is that there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of options. Bioidentical is the only option that gives you the brain support. So last thing on progesterone is that stress eats progesterone. And this is a phenomenon we call pregnenolone steal, where chronic stress shunts or steals the precursor hormone pregnenolone towards making cortisol instead of progesterone. So if you've been chronically stressed for years, maybe that's the reason you have that lower progesterone than you would have otherwise before perimenopause even hits. So by the time ovarian progesterone drops, your body has even less of a buffer. So this is why a full body workup is so important, because we need to know if the hormonal shifts are, one, natural, normal, coming from perimenopause and need some support. Two, if they're coming from ovarian, I don't want to say ovarian failure because that's actually a very different topic and different concern, but we'll say ovarian insufficiency, where the organ just needs more support because it's actually healthy, it's not downgrading, it's not downturning into perimenopause yet, so we need more support there. Is it coming from the brain, from the hypothalamus and pituitary, and the brain actually needs more support to be able to talk to the organs? Or is it coming from the adrenals? Because as the adrenals take over for making estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, maybe they're already fatigued and dysregulated, and the adrenals actually need more support. This is why this podcast doesn't have if you have this symptom, do this. If you have low estrogen, do this. Because the symptoms of low estrogen and high estrogen actually really look alike. Same with progesterone, same with testosterone sometimes. So there's not necessarily a specific matching symptom protocol for hormones, because we need to figure out where it's coming from, what organs need to be supported, and where the hormones actually are. So if you start treating yourself because you think you have estrogen dominance and you have all of the signs and symptoms, you might actually have perfectly normal estrogen levels, but your progesterone ratio is off. And by reducing your estrogen, you're actually worsening the ratio and you're not getting the support you need because your progesterone's really low. So do the testing, whether it's blood work, whether it's a Dutch test, whether it's a saliva test, get it done so you know where you're at and you're not guessing and making yourself worse. Okay. Thyroid. Because when we talk about hormones, we always need to include the thyroid, though it has its own special category on its own, it still is connected to our estrogen. Our thyroid is also our gas pedal for our metabolism. So every single cell in your body, including the neurons in your brain, depend on thyroid hormone to make energy. So when the thyroid hormone is low, even slightly low, your brain starts running on fumes. That's another sign of brain fog, memory issues, low mood, fatigue, slow thinking, all of it. And we all know that most labs are only going to check your TSH, which is your main thyroid hormone, your thyroid stimulating hormone, and it's actually a signaling hormone that comes from your brain, your pituitary. So a normal lab range for TSH is usually 0.4 to 5 is normal, depending on where you are in the country. So when the functional medicine range, though, is about 1 to 2.5 is where we would consider a healthy range. And we want to be in that with your TSH because anything outside of that can start to be a sign that your brain is starving for thyroid support as well. We also need that full thyroid panel. So TSH is one piece, but we also need the free T4, the free T3, your reverse T3, because all of these tell us how your organs are functioning, how your cells are receiving these hormones as well. And the reason traditionally doctors and insurance companies don't want to run the additional hormones unless you're already diagnosed with something is because most likely they're going to be well within range because those ranges are very large. So if your TSH is at like 4.2 and you're having some thyroid symptoms, you're still considered normal, but we could call it like a subclinical hypothyroid. And your T3 might just be borderline low, not enough where you need supplementation with prescriptions, but enough that you're feeling the symptoms. So we also want to run antibodies, and mainly because those tend to be present and silent for about 5 to 10 years before TSH becomes effective. So we need to know if there's an autoimmune process starting, which is really common in midlife and can be Hashimoto's, can be Graves. And what we're seeing a lot of right now is people who have both Hashimoto's and Graves at the same time, which just really complicates your healthcare. But knowing this can help you manage and know how to directly support all of your organs at the same time. So if your TSH is normal and your free T3 is at the bottom of the range, your brain's not getting enough active thyroid hormone. And if your reverse T3 is high, your body's putting on the brakes, usually because of chronic stress, blood sugar instability, inflammation. If you have antibodies, you have an autoimmune thyroid, and it needs to be addressed differently than a simple low thyroid or high thyroid, whatever you want to call it, because every one of these markers tells a different part of the story, and we need to make sure that we're running all of them. Okay. Thyroid and estrogen are also deeply intertwined. So estrogen can affect thyroid hormone binding in the cells, and thyroid affects how your cells respond to estrogen. So I'll always love the term like toxic coworkers because that seems the best phrase with this as well. You can't fix one without looking at the other. There's one more piece that I want to mention here too, because it keeps coming up in my practice. It keeps coming up as a major concern. And I don't know if it's social media, because it seems that way, but iron. Iron is the biggest question that people have, especially for women, because with our menstrual cycles, we are losing a lot of blood. And with GI infections like SIBO or overgrowth or H. pylori, you're also losing a lot of iron. And we also specifically want to look at ferritin, which is a storage form of iron in our body. Your thyroid needs iron to convert T4 to T3, which is the active form. So if your ferritin is low, even if you don't have the signs of anemia with low hemoglobin, low hematocrit, your thyroid still cannot make that active hormone efficiently. And ferritin is dropping across the board because of either heavier menstrual cycles, longer perimenopausal cycles, more frequent cycles, dietary changes, that low-grade gut inflammation. And ideally, we want to see ferritin above 70 for optimal thyroid and brain function. Most labs will bottom out at 15 and consider that normal, but that's not optimal. That's kind of like that barely there minimum, not anemic diagnosis, and that's a big difference as well. And while we're on the thyroid, Hashimoto's deserves its own moment. Autoimmune thyroid disease is one of the most common autoimmune conditions in women, and it's, I don't want to say hugely underdiagnosed, but it's hugely untreated, and many women have Hashimoto's for years before it gets named, because if we're just running TSH and it's just borderline and we're not running that autoimmune catchers, like the TPO antibodies, thyroglobulin antibodies, if those are elevated, your immune system is attacking your thyroid and the protocol becomes different. It's not just thyroid replacement. Now we shift into autoimmune support, which is gut healing, stress regulation, always a gluten-free trial, sometimes addressing underlying viral triggers like Epstein-Barr, which we talked about last week. So if you have a family history of autoimmune disease, you've ever had a positive ANA, you've had multiple viral infections, it feels like your thyroid's on a roller coaster, like it gets better and then it gets worse, get those antibodies checked and start working on an autoimmune protocol. So let's pause here because I feel like that was a lot and it feels really scary and overwhelming. Like, oh my God, if I don't get this under control now, I'm going to be a disaster for the rest of my life. And I hear you. Or you're like, oh my gosh, I just need to get all these labs. What am I going to do? So this information is not to overwhelm you. It's really meant to take the mystery out of what your body is going through because all these symptoms are not random. They're not separate from each other. They're predictable, they're measurable, and they're a treatable result of a hormone system that's in transition without support. And the work is not that you need to fix everything immediately. The work is let's take a look. Let's take a step back. Let's look at the big picture. So if you're very concerned about perimenopause and you're dialed in on what is your cycle doing? What are your hormones doing? I want you to pull back for a second and take a look at your whole body. And then let's build a protocol that meets you where you are from head to toe, inside out, outside in, not just system focused and symptom focused. Because if you just go into a system like, oh, this is perimenopause, I need everything to fix perimenopause, you're going to be missing that bigger picture of the thyroid and the gut and autoimmunity. We need to look at everything, okay? So I want to hit on the gut health real quick. I talked about this in depth in a previous episode about the estrobolome. So the estrobolome is part of your gut microbiome, the bacteria that live in your intestines that's actively involved in metabolizing and recycling estrogen. And these bacteria produce an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase that deconjugates or takes apart estrogen. So it takes it apart from the package that your liver wrapped it in, so it could be excreted, and allows all that estrogen to be reabsorbed back into your body. So that's not a bad thing because in a healthy estrobolome, the recycling is balanced. The right amount of estrogen gets reabsorbed, the rest gets eliminated, and your hormone balance stays where it should be. But with an unhealthy gut, dysbiosis, imbalance, an unhealthy estrobolome, the recycling can be too much or too little. And that can actually affect your estrogen levels being too high or low compared to what your ovaries are making. So this is why two women with the same ovarian estrogen output can have completely different hormone pictures and completely different brain symptoms, because this is one of the variables. And we don't really test for it unless you're in functional medicine. We can talk about it because just talking about it means supporting a healthy gut, diverse fiber from plants, fermented foods if you can tolerate them, probiotics in some cases, addressing the underlying gut issues like SIBO or yeast or leaky gut. And we can do things that disrupt that estrobolome, and being very aware of our use of antibiotics, our history of hormonal birth control, how is stress affecting us, what about processed foods and alcohol. So this is a connection back to your brain. If your estrobolome is out of balance and really your entire gut health is out of balance, affecting inflammatory levels, inflammation coming up the vagus into your brain, your estrogen levels are also going to be out of balance. Your neurotransmitters are going to be out of balance and your brain is out of balance. So your gut is your brain's closest neighbor, and the estrobolome is like one of the most overlooked rooms in the house. So this is part of that pulling back of that lens on hormones or just brain health and looking at the entire picture and circulation within the body. So now we have the whole hormone picture for the most part. Estrogen, the brain hormone, progesterone, the calming hormone, thyroid, the gas pedal for our metabolism and our energy sources, the estrobolome for our gut hormone recycler. All of these are talking to each other, and all four are talking to your brain. They're also measurable and supportable. So here's what I want you to take from this episode. Your brain in midlife is not the same as your brain at 25. You already know that. Your hormone landscape is different. The needs are different. The support is different. And the women who get the support, who get the right labs, who address the gut piece, who replace what's being depleted, adjust their nutrition, work on their sleep through these lifestyle factors and their nervous system to create a new landscape, that's how we get our brains back. And I've seen it happen over and over again. It's possible. So for women who don't get the support, who are told their labs are normal, who maybe are put on antidepressants, who are told to exercise more, we're just suffering longer than we need to be, and often decades. So I want to share one more story because I feel like it brings all of our pieces together. I had a patient who came in last year. She was 46. She even put on antidepressants at 41 for what her primary called, just perimenopausal anxiety. And she had tried 3 different SSRIs over the years, none which really fully worked. We also have to throw in her lifestyle factors, her life factors, going through a divorce, change in jobs, kids graduating from high school. There's so much stress going on, so many life transitions all at once. So we don't want to discount those things when we're talking about mental health as well. So SSRIs can be very helpful. Therapy can be incredibly important. But she was also on synthetic progestin birth control to help manage her cycles because they started to shift very quickly. So all of the symptoms like the fatigue, the fogginess, the weight gain, the insomnia, the sex drive, all of it had completely disappeared, but her labs were normal. So there's nothing to work on, right? Wrong. We know that. So when we ran that full picture, here's what we found. We had to look at her estradiol specifically, which was perimenopausal. Her FSH and LH were increasing, showing that she is in that perimenopausal range. Her progesterone was pretty low, if I recall correctly. I know that her free T3 was at the bottom of the range, and she had TPO antibodies that were elevated. So she had been undiagnosed with Hashimoto's. Her ferritin was 22, so not horrible, but not great. And we also ran a cortisol test, so a saliva test, which showed that her cortisol was inverted. It was really high at night and low in the morning, which is a classic sign. So we look at cortisol throughout the day, not just a one-time test with the blood work. And then, of course, we were able to do a GI map to show that elevated beta-glucuronidase. So her estrobolome, which is not recycling estrogen efficiently, contributing to all of this. So yeah, that was a lot of testing. So blood work, the Dutch test, which includes the cortisol test, the GI map, but it gave us a huge look at what was going on. So once again, 6 months. And I want to hit on the 6 months just for a second because she did all the work. She followed her plan. She used her medication correctly. She worked with all of her providers. She did all of her lifestyle things. But you know what? It didn't happen in 2 weeks. It didn't happen in one cycle. It took 6 months to reset her HP axis from her brain, support her adrenals, get her gut health turned over and supported. A lot of women start programs with me and expect to feel totally different in 10 days. And I really hit on this in my consults. Like, we need minimum 3 menstrual cycles or 3 months for your body and an endocrine system to catch up. So I know it's frustrating. I know it feels like it's going to take forever. I know after a week, you're like, I was perfect for a week and nothing's different. And I'm going to say, I know. Hang in there because this is not a quick fix. There is no miracle thing out there. We need a systematic, layered, hormone-aware approach that represents and respects the complexity of the female body. So give yourself a moment, give yourself a few months. And I know that's really frustrating, but when we start, I'm going to use as an example, when you start an antidepressant, what do they tell you? You got to be on this for 6 to 12 weeks before you see a difference. And everyone goes, oh, okay, no problem, cool. But if I tell you, hey, you're going to have to eat to your plan, you're going to have to cut out your workouts that are driving you crazy, you're going to have to change this in your life, you're going to have to eat in this specific way for your own body. We don't even give it the 6 weeks. So I encourage you to give yourself a big hug wherever you are right now. Know that your body's going to need that time to shift and take care of you in this moment. So let's bring this full circle to taking care of you. This is the reason I built the Mama Brain Reset program and the Perimenopause Power Pack. And I have my initial consultations this way they are set up. So with the Mama Brain Reset, we're going to close the doors this Sunday. I have space for, 10 more women now. It's going to be a month together. We're going to be diving in. So all of these things included. You're going to get your brain recovery plan PDF. We're going to have a private phone call for 30 minutes where we look at your picture, build your steps. Your oils and supplements are included, and we have a group call. So that way we're all in this together. We're going to start May 25th. And the investment is $247 all in, which is less than the oil kit would cost you at retail, and you get private support with me. I still have the Perimenopause Power Pack program running with Nurse Jen. She is amazing. We're seeing so many amazing results with our program, and women of all ages as well. So if you want more specific hormone support, you want one-to-one, you want the accountability, you want us to hold your hand, which we want to do through your program for 6 weeks to 3 months, that's the program for you. We'll list that down below. And if you think, I'm not sure you want to do a program, you want hardcore personalized support, you want to spend a lot of time one-on-one, you could schedule an initial consultation with me. We'll look at your labs. You're going to send me your old labs. We can order new labs. We can do functional testing. We're going to be one-on-one with each other, and I will be there to support you through the whole thing. So the links are in the description here for you, so you can get started with personalized care because you are listening to this thinking, yes, this all sounds like me. What am I going to do? You have quite a few options. You got 3 options right here. So I invite you to join us and get the support that you need. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so glad you listened. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone in your life who's been told their labs are normal and who needs to hear this. You're doing a great job of taking care of yourself, and we'll see you next time.